Hey guys, tonight we travel to one of the quietest lost cities on Earth. You're standing now under the hot South Asian sun, surrounded by dusty red bricks and perfectly straight streets. This is Mohenjo-Daro, one of the crown jewels of the Indus Valley civilization. You hear nothing but the distant cry of birds and the soft hiss of the wind, sweeping across ancient ruins that have stood here for over 4,000 years. You probably wouldn't survive this without sunscreen and at least a few gallons of bottled water. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where my sleepy travelers tune in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully onto one of the raised brick streets, your sandals crunching softly on the dry earth. The city stretches ahead in a grid streets laid out with unnerving precision, straight angles, and thoughtful planning that would make any modern urban planner blush. And you think, how did people this ancient build something this advanced? Historians still argue whether Mohenjo-Daro was the result of centralized government planning or a remarkably organized local community. What's clear is that whoever designed it wasn't winging it. The streets slope gently downward for drainage, and the main avenues intersect the side streets with geometric grace. This isn't chaos. This is order. You wander past neatly arranged homes built from uniform mud bricks, each brick pressed and fired to identical dimensions. There's a sense of harmony here, almost like the entire city was built from a single giant Lego set. And these bricks, they aren't random. They're standardized, water-resistant, and remarkably well-preserved. That's not luck, that's engineering. You pause at a small square well, its circular brick lining still perfectly intact. Water wells like this dot the city in astonishing numbers. Some estimates suggest over 700 in Mohenjo-Daro alone. Imagine having that kind of access to water in 2500 BCE. Your inner suburban self is quietly impressed. As you stroll farther, the air shifts slightly. The faint smell of water and clay leads you toward something truly special, the Great Bath. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. That little masterpiece deserves its own moment. For now, you take in the peaceful silence of this ancient city. The low sun casts long shadows from crumbling walls. You can almost hear the soft chatter of ancient merchants' children playing by the wells, and artisans firing their kilns, all going about their lives while surrounded by one of the most sophisticated urban designs the world had ever seen. And as we're about to discover, the real genius of Mohenjo-Daro wasn't only in its streets or houses. It was in something we rarely associate with ancient history: plumbing. Quiet, practical, but astonishingly advanced plumbing. Ahead of you now stands the Great Bath, the pride of Mohenjo-Daro's engineers, and a marvel that still leaves archaeologists scratching their heads. We're going to step into its cool, carefully sealed waters next, and trust me, it only gets more impressive from here. You approach the Great Bath, and as you get closer, you realize this isn't some muddy public pond or random stone pit. No, this thing feels intentional, elegant. Step onto a raised platform, and there it is before you, a massive rectangular basin sunken into the ground, framed by perfectly laid brick walls that have somehow resisted both time and weather for nearly 4,500 years. The bath measures about 12 meters long, 7 meters wide, and just over 2 meters deep. And standing here, you get the feeling that this place mattered a lot. Historians still argue whether the Great Bath was used for ritual purification, elite leisure, or some kind of early public sanitation experiment. No one knows for sure. But you can't help but imagine priests, merchants, or entire families descending into its cool waters under the sweltering Indus sun, washing off the dust of the day, both physically and perhaps spiritually. You peer down at the steps, broad, carefully cut, descending into the water from either side. They're so well crafted that you could walk right down them today. without hesitation. At the bottom, you can still see the faint imprint of the ancient floor's baked bricks carefully aligned to prevent water seepage. And here's where things get quietly brilliant: the waterproofing. The engineers of Mohenjo-Daro weren't content to just lay bricks and pray for the best. They lined the bath with a thick layer of natural bitumen, yes, the same sticky black tar-like substance you saw used in Mesopotamian construction. This waterproofing layer sealed the bath, preventing water from leaking into the surrounding soil. For a civilization without modern membranes or synthetic sealants, this was cutting-edge stuff. You run your hand along the bricks. They feel smooth, dense, and solid, each one carefully fired to a level that resisted erosion, swelling, and water absorption. These were not random bricks thrown together on a whim. Someone calculated the best mixture of mud, sand, and firing temperature to ensure that every bath drain and well stood strong. A small side chamber catches your eye, a tiny room connected to the bath, with a sloped drain, allowing water to flow out when needed. Overflow and drainage weren't afterthoughts. They were designed into the structure from the start. Someone was thinking long-term, and above you, you can almost picture the roof that once may have shaded this place. Some scholars speculate that wooden beams or cloth awnings might have protected bathers from the brutal summer heat. That kind of planning suggests a people who understood not just structure, but comfort. As you pace slowly around the edge, you notice something else: niches carved into the surrounding walls. Were these for oil lamps, for storing towels, robes, or ritual items? Historians still argue over their purpose. But their presence adds yet another layer of human detail to the scene. You step back now, taking in the full view one more time. The symmetry, the practicality, the quiet beauty of something so advanced, built not for war or conquest, but for care of the body, the spirit, and the community. And then you realize the Great Bath isn't an isolated wonder. It's a centerpiece in a city full of these clever hydraulic feats. Because if you look down the streets, yes, those perfectly straight streets, you'll find more evidence of the real genius of Mohenjo-Daro's engineers. Beneath your feet, hidden from sight but never from function, runs one of the world's earliest organized drainage networks. Covered brick channels snake through the city like arteries, carrying wastewater away from homes' baths and public spaces, keeping the city clean and livable. Next, we'll follow those drains down the streets past homes and into the guts of the city, where ancient plumbers laid out some of the most effective sanitation systems the ancient world would see for thousands of years. You step away from the Great Bath, leaving its cool, quiet brilliance behind, and head into the maze of residential streets. The sun's heat presses down, but here the streets are raised, elevated above ground level by tightly packed brick platforms. It's not a coincidence. You're walking on carefully layered infrastructure, the very foundation of Mohenjo-Daro's plumbing magic. Your sandals click lightly on the ancient bricks as you pass rows of homes. What strikes you isn't just the houses themselves, but the uniformity of the bricks they're made from. Every single one is nearly identical in size, roughly 7x, 14x, 28 centimeters. This might not sound thrilling at first, but think about it. In a time before modern standardization, these people somehow agreed that all bricks would follow this precise ratio. Historians still argue whether this standardization was the result of centralized authority or simply widespread cultural consensus. Either way, you're looking at one of the earliest examples of standardized mass production. Without it, none of the city's precise construction, its flat streets, its neat corners, its reliable drainage would have been possible. You watch as a group of brickmakers carry raw materials to an open-air kiln. The recipe is deceptively simple clay, mixed with fine sand molded into wooden frames, then fired at controlled temperatures in small batches. Too little heat and the bricks crumble. Too much and they crack. But the artisans know the balance, and they've been at it for generations. What makes these bricks so perfect for plumbing? Their density and uniform size. ensure that when stacked for walls, reservoirs, or drains, they fit tightly with minimal gaps, resisting both leaks and erosion. And their water-resistant surfaces mean moisture doesn't seep in and crumble the structures over time. The very bricks you're walking on have survived monsoons, floods, and centuries of abandonment. You pause beside one building and notice something peculiar. A shallow stone platform, likely the remnants of a household bath. Yes, private baths weren't reserved for the elite alone. Even many average homes featured washing areas connected to street-level drains. These drains carried wastewater directly from homes into larger public channels. You trace one of these channels running along the edge of the street, covered by removable brick slabs for maintenance. The channel slopes gently, guiding wastewater toward the main sewer lines that snake beneath the city. The entire system works by gravity, simple, elegant, and surprisingly efficient. Historians still argue how widespread private plumbing was across all socioeconomic levels. But even modest houses often had access to drainage, a luxury many much later civilizations couldn't claim. You glance at one junction where a covered drain connects to a deeper manhole, an ancient maintenance hatch essentially. Workers could remove these stone covers to clear blockages, maintaining the system season after season. It's hard not to chuckle at how modern it feels. Somewhere thousands of years ago, a poor Mohenjo-Daro plumber was already dealing with the timeless nightmare of clogged drains. As you continue down the street, you pass more evidence of their forethought. Water spouts allow rainfall to drain from roofs directly into the streets, reducing water damage to walls. Narrow lanes slope gently toward larger avenues, preventing flooding during seasonal rains. And in the distance, you catch sight of another impressive structure, a massive public well. But before we head there, it's worth pausing to appreciate just how much these clever bricks contributed to everything around you. Without uniform water-resistant bricks, none of this would have held together. No neatly sealed baths, no durable sewer lines, no raised streets resisting the annual floods of the Indus River. This quiet little invention, standardized fired bricks, was the unsung hero of Mohenjo-Daro's plumbing brilliance. Next, we'll follow the flow of wastewater as it leaves these residential drains and enters the wider, more ambitious sewer system, the network that truly sets Mohenjo-Daro apart as one of the most hygienically advanced cities of the ancient world. You follow the narrow street as it gently slopes downward like a quiet invitation to descend into the very veins of Mohenjo-Daro. The smaller household drains you've seen all morning now begin to converge, merging their little trickles of wastewater into something larger, something far more ambitious, the city's underground drainage system. You crouch by the edge of one of these main drains, peering into a covered brick channel running parallel to the street. The bricks here are as meticulously laid as any you've seen, uniform, tightly stacked and slightly angled to keep the water flowing without pooling. This isn't haphazard trench digging. This is civil engineering. Historians still argue whether the people of Mohenjo-Daro invented this drainage system themselves, or built upon even older traditions from nearby settlements like Harappa. What's clear is that they perfected it on a scale few civilizations would match for centuries. The drain you're observing is fully covered, capped with heavy rectangular bricks, creating a flat walking surface above. But maintenance workers could easily remove these slabs to access the channels when blockages occurred. You smile quietly, imagining ancient sanitation crews lifting these covers with makeshift crowbars and grumbling about whatever unpleasant object caused the clog, a scene not too different from your local sewer teams today. You stand and follow the path of the drain. At every intersection, additional side drains feed into it. This branching system allows water and waste to be collected from dozens of houses before being funneled into larger underground sewers that lead out of the city entirely. Waste wasn't simply dumped into the streets or local wells. It was actively removed, carried far enough away to protect both hygiene and comfort. Occasionally, you spot vertical openings spaced along the drain, simple stone-lined shafts functioning as inspection holes. They allowed workers to check water flow, clear debris, or even redirect runoff during monsoon seasons. These shafts mark another layer of intelligent planning. Not only was the system built, but it was designed to be maintainable. You keep walking and notice how the streets themselves support this entire network. The main roads are slightly raised, functioning as protective barriers that separate clean water sources from wastewater. It's clear the engineers thought not just about how to move water, but how to keep different types of water clean. Dirty storm runoff strictly separated. Historians still argue whether these choices reflected an understanding of waterborne illness or simply arose from practical observation. Did they know that stagnant wastewater led to disease? Or did they simply notice fewer people got sick when waste was kept away? Either way, the outcome is remarkably modern, a functioning sanitation system that limited exposure to contaminated water. You reach one of the primary drainage outflows, a wider, deeper channel leading beyond the city's outer wall toward a low-lying area likely used for waste disposal or natural filtration. The city didn't just trap its waste inside. It exported it, maintaining an internal cleanliness that remains astonishing for its era. And perhaps most impressive, all of this was accomplished without metal pipes, electric pumps, or complicated machinery. Gravity did the heavy lifting. Slopes were carefully calculated. Water simply obeyed the pathways designed for it. You pause for a moment, thinking of how much this contrasts with some later cities, even in the relatively recent past, where raw sewage often flowed openly down the streets. Mohenjo-Daro, thousands of years earlier, had already solved problems that took many other civilizations millennia to address. Your eyes catch another nearby structure, a public well wide circular, lined with the same uniform bricks as the sewers beneath you. This city didn't just excel at removing waste, it was equally skilled at delivering clean, fresh water. And as you'll soon see, their mastery of wells was no less impressive than their sewer design. Next, we'll climb up from the drains and walk toward one of those ancient wells, perfectly positioned, still standing tall, and revealing yet another layer of Mohenjo-Daro's quiet genius. You leave the quiet hum of the drains behind and step toward the public well, rising like a humble monument in the center of the neighborhood. Its circular brick walls glow warm under the afternoon sun. The bricks, again perfectly uniform, spiral upward in even deliberate layers, forming a structure that feels as solid now as it must have when first laid. You lean slightly over the rim, peering into the dark, cool shaft. The water glistens far below, reflecting a tiny sliver of sky. You feel the temperature drop just standing near it. This well has likely served generation after generation of families, drawing up buckets of clean water for drinking, cooking, and washing. Historians still argue whether every household in Mohenjo-Daro relied solely on these communal wells, or whether some wealthier residents had their own private wells within their courtyards. What's certain is that these public wells were everywhere. Some estimates suggest one every 30 meters or so, ensuring that no resident lived far from fresh water. You watch as a woman lowers a simple rope and bucket system into the shaft. The smooth pull of the rope suggests this is muscle memory performed countless times before. Water drawn, she carefully pours it into a wide ceramic jar, likely designed specifically to balance easily on her hip or head for the walk home. And it wasn't just the number of wells that amazes you. It's their clever design. Many of these wells were dug deep into the water table, but built with sloped foundations to prevent collapse. The tightly fitted bricks resisted erosion, while gaps between the outermost rings allowed any overflow to seep back into the earth, rather than pooling dangerously around the base. You notice that even around the well's small stone or baked brick platforms are built to prevent mud from forming a detail that keeps both the water and the users clean and safe. In the rare event of a flood, these platforms helped minimize contamination from surface runoff. Again, simple but brilliant. You follow another resident as they carry fresh water back toward one of the nearby homes. Entering the shaded doorway, you step into a small courtyard, another clever design element of Mohenjo-Daro's domestic architecture. Here, even average homes include a tiny bathing area paved with fired bricks that gently slope toward an opening in the wall. Wastewater flows directly from the home into the street-level drainage system you just explored. It's domestic plumbing at a scale many later cities couldn't achieve for centuries. Historians still argue whether these private baths served purely hygienic purposes or carried religious and cultural significance tied to purity. The truth might be somewhere in between. After all, daily life in Mohenjo-Daro blended utility with custom at almost every turn. You run your hand along the low brick wall of the bath. It's smooth, sturdy, and faintly warm from the day's sun. The waterproof plaster that once lined it has long since faded, but you can still trace where water once pooled before being swept away through the drain. The household kitchen sits nearby, complete with a hearth, storage jars, and grain-grinding stones. Everything orbits around water cooking, cleaning, even food storage. It's not just plumbing. It's urban life shaped by water access. And remarkably, the same brickwork that channels wastewater away also protects the city from flooding. Streets and drains double as flood management systems, helping the city survive the Indus River's seasonal mood swings. But we'll see more of that soon. For now, you sit quietly in the shaded courtyard, marveling at how these seemingly small domestic details build into something grand, a city designed with water at its heart, in ways most ancient and even modern cities never fully achieved. As evening cools the air, we'll step deeper into one of Mohenjo-Daro's more curious features: how they managed sewage waste and even early forms of sanitation with a surprising level of engineering finesse. Yes, even their toilets were shockingly advanced. You rise from the shaded courtyard, stepping back into the soft amber light of early evening. The streets remain quiet, but as you walk deeper into the neighborhood, your eye catches something oddly modern nestled into the back corners of several homes, small private latrines. Yes, you've arrived at the surprisingly advanced world of Mohenjo-Daro's ancient toilets. You pause outside one home, peeking through what was once a doorway. Inside, beside the standard features storage jars, grinding stones, sleeping platforms, you spot a small raised platform made from fired bricks with a shallow hole in its center. This isn't just a crude pit. It's a purpose-built toilet designed for both comfort and sanitation. Historians still argue whether these were true flush toilets or simply well-managed waste chutes. But what's clear is that many of these latrines were directly connected to brick-lined drainage channels or small pits that funneled waste outside the living space. Wastewater from household baths often helped flush these channels clean, carrying waste into larger covered drains beneath the streets. You crouch to examine one such chute. The slope of the floor directs liquid away, minimizing standing moisture inside the home. And the latrine itself is slightly elevated, likely making it easier to squat without stepping directly into the runoff. A thoughtful, practical design that says, if we've been through this before. And the smell, surprisingly manageable. Many archaeologists believe that ashes or sand may have been poured into these latrines, regularly absorbing moisture and reducing odor. A practice that modern composting toilets would later echo thousands of years later. You wonder if some clever Indus Valley sanitation worker once patted himself on the back for discovering that little life hack. You move along the street now, noticing that almost every home, wealthy or modest, has some variation of this waste disposal feature. Sanitation wasn't exclusive to the elite. It was embedded into everyday urban life. At several points, you spot larger communal drains with covered inspection hatches spaced at intervals. These provided access points for maintenance crews to clean out sediment and blockages. You can almost hear the groan of some poor worker tasked with unclogging ancient pipes, a profession apparently eternal across human history. Historians still argue how much central oversight there was in maintaining these sewers. Was there a public works department, or did neighborhoods take responsibility for their own sections? While we may never know the exact logistics, the consistent design across Mohenjo-Daro suggests shared standards and cooperation. Further down, you arrive at a broader main drain, a trunk line that collected waste from several smaller side streets. The engineering is impressive long brick-covered channels that maintained a consistent slope to keep waste moving efficiently out of the densely populated city center. You realize that Mohenjo-Daro's waste system didn't just hide human waste. It actively managed it in ways that protected water sources, reduced disease, and kept streets remarkably clean compared to many later cities. You glance up at the slowly darkening sky, realizing just how modern these ancient people were in their thinking. In civilizations far younger than this, one human waste would still be dumped into city streets, rivers, or shared cesspits with little thought for hygiene or public health. Yet here in the Indus Valley, 500 years ago, families lived with private latrines, efficient sewage channels, public sanitation access points, and water-sealed homes. It's easy to forget how rare this level of urban planning was for its time, and how far ahead of many future societies these unknown engineers truly were. And the genius didn't stop with the waste. Tomorrow's fresh drinking water was just as carefully managed as today's outgoing wastewater. Because the same people who engineered these latrines also designed one of the densest, most effective networks of freshwater wells the ancient world would ever see, ever. You glance toward another round, well up ahead, its bricks shining faintly under the moonlight, waiting for tomorrow's first early riser to drop a bucket down. And as the city quiets even further, we'll soon explore how this brilliant web of wells ensured Mohenjo-Daro's residents never wandered far for clean water. The moon glides higher as you follow the rows of brick homes weaving through the quiet city. The air cools, carrying the faint scent of damp clay and the Indus River somewhere off in the darkness. You stop at yet another well, its circular opening framed by those same familiar, perfectly fitted bricks. The more you see, the more you realize water wasn't just available here, it was everywhere. You run your fingers along the lip of the well, feeling the craftsmanship beneath your touch. Each brick is precisely angled, fitted together in a tight spiral that holds its shape after thousands of years. You stare down the shaft, where the moonlight fades into still black water far below. Historians still argue whether these wells were dug individually or if a citywide plan designated their locations. But no matter who decided, the outcome is extraordinary. Mohenjo-Daro was dotted with hundreds of these wells, perhaps more than any other ancient city of its time. You watch a family approach this well, even in the dim light. The father lowers a simple bucket on a rope, while his child waits beside him, cradling a ceramic jar. The well's walls keep the rope from scraping, protecting both the cord and the structure over countless daily trips. Every drop of water feels precious, but the supply remains steady even during dry seasons because these wells tap into the region's remarkably stable groundwater reserves. You glance around and notice that the wells aren't simply scattered randomly. Many sit along intersections of streets easily accessible to several households. Others are tucked inside private courtyards, allowing wealthier families to draw water directly from their homes. Some were even shared among a small group of neighboring households, perhaps the earliest version of the neighborhood water cooler. You begin to appreciate the delicate balance that allowed this city to thrive. With no rivers flowing directly through Mohenjo-Daro's streets, groundwater provided a safe, controlled alternative to surface water, which could carry disease or become contaminated during floods. And the water wasn't just for drinking. Residents used it for bathing, washing clothes, cleaning dishes, preparing food, cooling courtyards, and tending rooftop gardens. Nearly every daily task here revolved around this simple, silent infrastructure. Historians still argue whether these wells were designed with intentional filtration in mind. Some believe layers of sand and gravel were used at the base to purify the water naturally as it seeped downward. If true, it would suggest an early form of water treatment far ahead of its time. You follow one woman now as she balances a filled jar on her hip, walking gracefully back to her home. Her path takes her down a sloped alley where small channels guide runoff away from walkways and prevent puddles from forming a detail you're beginning to expect by now. Even the homes themselves seem built with water in mind. The flat rooftops likely collected rainwater during monsoon seasons, channeling it through carefully designed spouts into small courtyard drains. Every drop was managed, captured, or guided somewhere purposeful. As you continue walking, you notice that every element here, bricks, drains, wells, streets, works together, like parts of a living organism. The system doesn't feel forced or rigid. It feels natural, like a city that understood itself. You reach yet another well, this one slightly larger, located near a cluster of public baths and market stalls. Communal wells like this serve denser areas, reducing the need for long trips through the bustling city. Here, even the busiest residents could quickly fill their jars before returning to their trades. You pause again and marvel that this network, this vast, silent web of water delivery, allowed tens of thousands of people to live, trade, wash, cook, and thrive in an otherwise dry, unforgiving climate. And yet, for all their mastery of fresh water, the people of Mohenjo-Daro knew they couldn't control nature entirely. The Indus River wasn't always so cooperative. Seasonal floods could test even the most carefully designed infrastructure. And soon as we walk farther into the outskirts, we'll see how the city's engineers confronted the mighty river itself, building not just homes and baths, but entire flood management systems. You follow a wide avenue leading away from the city's denser core, where homes give way to open ground and embankments. The moonlight reveals a faint shimmer ahead, not water exactly, but the low outlines of flood defenses that once guarded Mohenjo-Daro against the mighty Indus River's seasonal rage. Here's where the city's quiet genius truly flexes. You're standing at the edge of their ancient flood management system, the hidden backbone that protected everything you've seen so far. The baths, the drains, the wells, even the very streets beneath your feet. Historians still argue whether Mohenjo-Daro's placement was a calculated compromise between proximity to the Indus and safety from its floods, or whether shifting river patterns forced the city into a continuous battle with rising waters. Either way, they knew floods were coming, and they planned accordingly. You trace your hand along the slope of an old embankment built from compacted earth-baked bricks and stone layers. It rises just enough to gently redirect overflowing water away from the heart of the city during monsoon surges. These were not towering, dramatic walls like you might see on medieval castles, but subtle, wide-spreading mounds that worked with the water's force, not against it. As you walk, you notice how the entire city subtly rises above the surrounding landscape. Mohenjo-Daro was built on a series of artificial mounds, elevated platforms of carefully layered brick and fill that helped lift its homes, workshops, and public spaces above the highest flood lines. This was flood management, by elevation, simple, elegant, and surprisingly effective. And should the water breach these barriers, the city had contingencies. You already saw the sloped streets, drainage ditches, and outflow channels designed to quickly guide water away, preventing standing floodwaters from stagnating inside city blocks. These overflow systems worked in concert with the daily sewer network, shifting effortlessly from routine sanitation to emergency flood management. You imagine the city during monsoon season, dark clouds heavy with rain, rivers swollen and rising while water rushes harmlessly down prepared channels. The streets remain passable, wells stay protected, waste remains contained. It's a balancing act between nature's force and human planning. One Mohenjo-Daro's engineers executed better than many cities that would follow them. Historians still argue whether these defenses ultimately failed or whether larger environmental shifts doomed the city. Theories abound: tectonic activity, altering river courses, upstream deforestation, leading to heavier silt deposits, or simply changing climate patterns that disrupted once reliable monsoon cycles. What's certain is that Mohenjo-Daro's relationship with water was always dynamic, part mastery, part ongoing negotiation. As you climb one of the raised platforms, You see evidence of that slow struggle, layers of silt built up over older bricks, flood deposits that hint at how many times the Indus tested this city's defenses. Each layer represents not just water, but the quiet work of people who cleaned, repaired, and rebuilt again and again. You take a slow breath. The night air smells faintly of wet earth, timeless familiar. You're not just standing on the city's outskirts. You're standing at the fragile edge where ancient technology met the unrelenting forces of nature. And yet, in their quiet way, the people of Mohenjo-Daro anticipated so much of what later engineers would rediscover: elevation redundancy, controlled overflow. Their approach wasn't about brute force. It was about respect for the water, guiding it, managing it, but never pretending it could be fully conquered. As you turn back toward the city center, the moonlight glints off distant rooftops and open courtyards, each one still carefully connected to its drains and wells, part of the same system, the same delicate dialogue between engineering and environment. Next, as dawn threatens to break, we'll leave these large-scale defenses behind and return to the quieter details of daily life. The small rituals, household chores, and water use routines that made this plumbing system more than just an abstract achievement, but something intimately lived day after day by the residents who called Mohenjo-Daro home. The sky softens into that gentle blue of early dawn as you wander back into the city's quieter quarters. The towering embankments are behind you now, and instead you find yourself surrounded by the rhythms of daily life, where all that brilliant plumbing and drainage wasn't just theory. It was practice woven into every small, ordinary moment. A woman steps into her courtyard, still barefoot from sleep, carrying an empty jar to the family well. The brick-paved ground under her feet stays dry and clean, thanks to the thoughtful slope leading any rainwater directly toward the household drain. She lowers her bucket, carefully drawing cool water up from the depths before splashing a little on her face to greet the morning. You watch as she carries the water inside, where the day's quiet rituals begin. First, washing. The small brick platform in the corner serves as the family's private bath, just large enough to crouch, wash, and drain away used water through a short, brick-lined channel in the floor. The slope is barely perceptible to the casual eye, but perfectly calculated to keep wastewater flowing outward. Historians still argue whether these small domestic bathing spaces were reserved for wealthier families or common throughout most homes. But here, you see them everywhere, a mark of how deeply water management was embedded into the architecture itself. You glance around at the courtyard. Neat storage jars line one wall, their wide mouths sealed with clay lids. Some contain water, others grain or dried dates. The family's simple kitchen sits nearby, a clay hearth blackened with soot, a small grindstone resting beside it, and yet another jar holding water drawn earlier for cooking. Across the alley, another family tends to laundry. A woman rhythmically beats wet cloth against a flat stone slab, the water splashing off and draining neatly through grooves in the courtyard floor. The used water trickles away harmlessly, guided out of sight by those same clever channels you followed since arriving here. You marvel at how seamlessly these designs fit into the flow of life. No running taps, no wasteful fountains. Just a quiet, practical system built around carrying, collecting, washing, and disposing all without polluting the precious water that sustained them. Even waste disposal, which so often turns cities into filth-ridden hazards, feels deliberate here. The family latrine sits behind a short partition wall, slightly elevated to keep standing water out its runoff, guided into the residential drains that carry waste safely out of the neighborhood. You pause, considering how this simple daily repetition, the filling of jars, the draining of baths, the emptying of latrines, built an entire urban rhythm that quietly protected public health. Everyone knew how the system worked, because everyone was part of it. Historians still argue whether any kind of formal sanitation authority managed upkeep, or whether responsibility fell to individual households. Regardless, the city functioned as a shared agreement: care for your drains, respect your water, maintain your wells. you follow a man and his teenage son carrying large jars toward a market stall farther down the street. Even here, water plays a quiet supporting role. Fruit sellers wash produce under small streams of clean water. Butchers clean their stone counters, guiding waste down sloped channels toward covered street drains. Further along, you hear faint splashes as a group of children chase one another around a public well, laughing as one tips a little too much water over a friend's head. The well is fitted with a simple overflow channel, a small trench that carries excess water safely away rather than allowing it to puddle. You smile, realizing that in Mohenjo-Daro, even childish mischief doesn't disrupt the plumbing. The city isn't sterile, but it is orderly. Unlike many ancient urban centers where waste festered, openly inviting insects, rodents, and disease, Mohenjo-Daro feels breathable. The air carries earth and moisture, but not filth. And in all of this, baths, drains, wells, waste, channels, you see the unspoken brilliance of the Indus Valley engineers. They didn't just build a plumbing system. They designed a way of life where water shaped daily routines as naturally as breathing. As the sun finally crests the eastern horizon, you prepare to explore one of the subtler mysteries surrounding this whole achievement. Whether the people who built Mohenjo-Daro understood just how much their plumbing protected them from something they couldn't see, disease. Because up next, we'll gently tiptoe into one of the most debated questions of all. Did these ancient engineers unknowingly brush up against early public health principles long before anyone knew what a germ even was? The sun rises higher now, washing the rooftops of Mohenjo-Daro in soft gold as you continue your quiet exploration. The streets are coming to life. Vendors setting up their stalls, residents carrying water, sweeping their courtyards, tending to their daily routines. And beneath it all, like invisible threads, the plumbing continues its silent, constant work. You pause at a crossroads, taking in the almost casual brilliance of the system beneath your feet. The drains carry waste away, the wells deliver clean water, and the streets remain remarkably dry even after centuries of time have passed. But now you find yourself wondering, did they know? Did the people of Mohenjo-Daro understand that this carefully managed water network wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival? Historians still argue whether the Indus Valley people possessed anything resembling germ theory or even proto-germ theory. After all, there's no written record to consult, but when you study their city, it's hard not to see hints that they recognized a link between cleanliness and health. Consider this unlike many ancient cities where open sewage flowed in full view, inviting flies and other pests. Mohenjo-Daro's waste was hidden and controlled. Dirty water didn't linger, it moved. Waste didn't pool, it drained. And even storm runoff was steered away from residential areas through carefully designed overflow channels. You watch a woman scrubbing her family's laundry platform again, sweeping away any leftover soap and grime before it can sit. This wasn't just tidy housekeeping, it was cultural. The idea of cleanliness clearly mattered here. Historians still argue whether this emphasis on sanitation was driven by religious ritual aesthetic preference, or keen observation of patterns like how fewer people seemed to fall ill when waste was removed and wells stayed uncontaminated. Perhaps without understanding bacteria or viruses, they simply knew that clean surroundings led to fewer fevers and fewer funerals. You turn your attention to the wells again. It's not just their careful construction that's impressive, it's their placement. They're raised slightly above ground level, protected from floodwaters that might carry contaminated runoff. Some even have small brick aprons around the base, diverting surface water away and reducing the risk of pollutants seeping back into the drinking supply. You follow one elderly man as he performs his morning ritual, offering a small prayer before dipping his bucket into the family's well. For him, clean water may have carried spiritual significance as much as practical safety, a daily reminder that purity was both divine and essential. Even inside the great bath which you visited earlier, cleanliness seemed ritualized. Some scholars speculate it was used not only for spiritual purification, but also as a public health measure where shared bathing reduced grime and infection among the population. A clean body, after all, meant fewer skin infections, fewer parasites, and a stronger community. You pause at another private bathhouse and glance into the drains, snaking away from it, sloped perfectly to ensure constant movement. Water never stands still here. And standing water is exactly where parasites, mosquitoes, and bacteria thrive. Whether by accident or observation, the engineers of Mohenjo-Daro eliminated one of the most dangerous features of urban living: stagnant filth. Historians still argue whether these sanitation strategies were formalized policy or simply cultural habits that became embedded through centuries of experience. But either way, Mohenjo-Daro offers something extraordinary, a city that may have accidentally stumbled upon the very core of public health before the concept even had a name. You step out into the broader marketplace again, where food stalls bustle and children chase one another. Giggling, clean water for cooking, steady drainage for waste, thoughtful design for daily hygiene. It's a living system shaped not by theoretical science, but by generations of small, practical discoveries slowly accumulating into a remarkably healthy urban space. And yet, for all its brilliance, this system wasn't invincible. Nature would continue to push back against these carefully balanced routines. The rivers would shift, floods would become more unpredictable. And slowly, this world of elegant water management would begin to strain under forces far beyond its control. Soon we'll explore how even this marvel of urban planning, this city so far ahead of its time, would eventually face collapse, and how its people slowly disappeared, leaving behind these silent wells, these dry drains, and these quiet clues to a once thriving civilization. The marketplace hums behind you as you walk once again toward the quieter outskirts, where Mohenjo-Daro's grand designs faced forces far greater than human hands. You step onto a gently sloped embankment, its compacted layers of earth still visible beneath loose stones. And there, out in the distance, the faint shimmer of the Indus River flickers under the sun, calm now, but never truly tamed. For all of Mohenjo-Daro's ingenious plumbing, its engineers always faced a larger, unpredictable opponent: nature itself. Historians still argue whether it was climate change, shifting river patterns, tectonic activity, or all three that began the slow unraveling. The Indus, powerful and moody, frequently altered its course. Some years floods were manageable, diverted by the city's careful embankments and drainage channels. Other years they came harder, faster, or from unexpected directions. You walk along one of the ancient defensive ridges now, its height barely noticeable unless you know what to look for. These weren't towering flood walls. They were quiet barriers, subtle earthworks designed to redirect water's fury, not confront it head-on. And for a while, they worked beautifully. But over generations, the river silted up its bed, rising steadily with each flood season. What once had been a carefully calculated balance between city and river grew harder to maintain. Each flood deposited layers of mud and debris, raising ground levels and slowly choking drainage outlets that once guided water safely away. You crouch at one such blocked outlet, its brick-lined tunnel half filled with hardened silt. This isn't the failure of bad design. It's the slow, quiet erosion of centuries. The systems weren't flawed, they were simply overwhelmed by time. Some historians speculate that deforestation upstream contributed to worsening floods, as forests were cleared for farmland or timber rains hit the soil harder, washing more sediment downstream and adding to the Indus's shifting burden. Others argue that tectonic shifts subtly altered the river's gradient, pushing it farther west or south, starving Mohenjo-Daro of the steady water sources that once sustained it. The Indus was never still. It was always moving, always reshaping its own story. You rise again and wander back toward the higher mounds of the city's core. Even here, signs of environmental stress remain. Layers of silt alternate with layers of construction, evidence of rebuilding efforts that tried again and again to adapt to rising flood levels. Historians still argue whether the final abandonment was sudden or gradual. Was there a catastrophic flood that finally forced residents to flee for good, or did families slowly drift away, generation by generation, as farming became harder, wells less reliable, and markets emptied of traders? You walk through one half-collapsed home where nature has quietly reclaimed the space. Tall grasses poke through cracked bricks. Lizards dart between wall remnants. The once busy bath platform sits dry and crumbling its drain, long ago clogged with layers of fine silt. It's humbling standing here. For all their brilliance, the people of Mohenjo-Daro couldn't outlast the patient power of shifting rivers and creeping mud. They held back nature longer than most, but not forever. And yet, even in collapse, something beautiful lingers. The infrastructure didn't fail dramatically. It aged quietly, absorbed by the land as the people moved on. Wells-filled drains, clogged embankments, softened, but the story remains etched in every exposed brick and abandoned channel. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The city breathes differently now. No footsteps, no voices, no clatter of buckets at the wells. Just the soft rustle of wind across old brick, the distant murmur of the river, a gentle reminder that nature always waits for its turn. But though the engineers are gone, their legacy whispers still. As you step over another section of carefully aligned drain bricks, you realize how much knowledge they carried, how many small, brilliant choices they made to live alongside the unpredictable world they inherited. Next, we'll return once more to the heart of this abandoned city, where the final pieces of its engineering story reveal themselves not in collapse, but in what endures the careful planning and the quiet mastery of plumbing and the uncredited brilliance of the engineers who shaped one of humanity's first great cities. You make your way back toward the heart of Mohenjo-Daro, your steps tracing the quiet resilience that still radiates from every stone and brick. The streets lie empty now, but the city's silent systems remain preserved like a blueprint that time itself forgot to erase. You pass another series of covered drains, their brick lids still neatly in place. Beneath your feet, the old wastewater channels lie intact, perfectly aligned. Even abandoned, the plumbing system of Mohenjo-Daro refuses to fully disappear. Historians still argue whether these intact features are the result of advanced construction techniques or simply the city's long burial under protective layers of silt. But as you stand here, you suspect it's both. They built well, and nature accidentally helped preserve their legacy. The Great Bath looms again ahead, as steady and composed as it was when you first approached it under the hot sun. You walk alongside its familiar brick steps, now seeing it with new eyes, not just as a centerpiece of ritual, but as the most visible symbol of this civilization's quiet engineering brilliance. Its drains are still visible, leading off into channels that would have carried overflow safely away, preventing stagnation. The bitumen lining remains in patches, clinging to the brick after thousands of years, still performing its task, long after the last bather stepped out of the cool waters. You move into nearby residential areas again, where even the smallest homes still show evidence of their careful design. Private baths still slope gently toward their drains. Latrines still sit positioned above sealed chutes. Courtyards still slope slightly inward or outward, controlling water flow with a precision that speaks to generations of trial and error. You pause near a larger home with its own well nestled in the corner of the courtyard. It's easy to imagine the family that once lived here, a mother filling jars, children splashing water onto brick-paved floors, servants sweeping debris away from drains before it could clog the system. A quiet choreography repeated every single day that kept the household and the entire city functioning. The wells, the baths, the latrines, the drains, each one small but together, a masterpiece. Mohenjo-Daro's plumbing wasn't a handful of standout features. It was an entire city engineered around water from the ground up. Every home connected, every street designed to support the flow, every flood accounted for. It was infrastructure that served both public and private life seamlessly. Historians still argue whether this integrated approach to water management was driven by a central authority, some ancient urban planner with a grand vision, or whether it evolved more organically shaped by a culture that understood water's critical role through lived experience. But you can feel the intentionality everywhere you look. Even at the city's edges, where agricultural fields once stretched outward, traces remain of small irrigation channels that diverted river water gently onto crops, allowing life to thrive, while maintaining control over nature's fickle moods. And perhaps most remarkable of all these innovations emerged not from imperial ambitions, but from peaceful, steady craftsmanship. Unlike the towering ziggurats of Mesopotamia or the colossal monuments of Egypt, Mohenjo-Daro's genius was humble, pragmatic quiet, focused on everyday life. You rest now on a low wall, the morning sun warm on your face. The city may be empty of people, but their hands still echo in the bricks beneath you. Their knowledge whispers through the clean lines of drains, the smooth curves of wells, the dry pathways that once hummed with life. You've seen many ruins on this long walk through history, grand palaces, epic fortresses, massive temples. But few places reveal such a deeply human story as this one. A city where sanitation, safety, and comfort were not luxuries for the elite, but birthrights for the many. And as you sit, you realize, though, their names are lost. The engineers of Mohenjo-Daro live on. Their quiet mastery survives not in grand statues or epic poems, but in these very bricks, still perfectly fitted, still draining rainwater, still marking the outline of one of history's greatest plumbing marvels. Soon, we'll step back from the technical marvels and look more closely at the people themselves, at the engineers, artisans, and ordinary citizens whose hands and minds made this city possible, yet whose stories remain mostly unwritten. Because behind every flawless drain lies a forgotten pair of hands that shaped it. You rise from the low wall and begin walking again this time, not following the water channels or embankments, but imagining the people who once filled these streets. The bricks remain. The drains still run. But the hands that built them, those are the real mystery. You glance into another residential courtyard, picturing a craftsman at work carefully laying down brick after brick, testing the slope by watching how water trickles across the surface. His trained eye and steady hand ensure the bath drains perfectly, the latrine slopes just right, the courtyard remains dry. There was no laser level or spirit bubble, just pure skill passed down through generations. Historians still argue whether these workers were highly specialized artisans, or if most families simply knew enough basic engineering to maintain their own homes. What's undeniable is that precision was part of daily life here, woven into the very culture. You walk past a cluster of kilns, now ancient brick firing sites, where raw clay became the uniform building blocks of the city. The air would have once been thick with heat and smoke workers carefully monitoring the flames, ensuring each batch of bricks reached the perfect hardness. Too soft and they would crumble, too brittle and they would shatter. Even here, water played a role mixed into the clay, controlling moisture during shaping, influencing how the bricks would dry and cure. Every fired brick carried within it a small act of chemistry and craftsmanship multiplied thousands of times to build this massive urban puzzle. Further along, you spot the remains of a workshop where stone weights once were shaped. These small, carefully calibrated measures were used to ensure fairness in trade, but also indirectly reflected the same mindset applied to plumbing balance, precision, consistency. The same culture that measured grain carefully, surely approached water management with equal discipline. You pause near one of the city's larger public baths again. Here, perhaps, the most skilled engineers came together, not only to build, but to maintain. Clearing sediment from the drains, repairing broken tiles, applying fresh layers of bitumen. Maintenance wasn't a luxury. It was part of sustaining this carefully balanced urban machine. Historians still argue how these engineers were trained. Were there guilds, apprenticeships, formal schools? Or was knowledge simply handed down within families? One cautious master teaching a patient student the ancient art of getting water to flow just right. You imagine the quiet pride of those long-gone engineers, men and women, who likely never saw themselves as innovators, but as problem solvers. They couldn't read modern hydrology texts or reference blueprints. Their knowledge lived in their fingertips, their instincts, their shared traditions. And behind them stood a society that valued cooperation. Mohenjo-Daro wasn't ruled by warlords building towering monuments to their own glory. It was built by consensus, a community that understood the simple, essential truth that clean water and working drains benefited everyone. You glance at another private home's bath still intact. Its polished brick surface reflects the morning sun like tiny mirrors. This wasn't just engineering, it was dignity. Even modest families could bathe, wash their clothes, and dispose of waste without fear of filth or disease. It speaks volumes about the priorities of this civilization. And yet, their names are lost. The city offers no kings, no generals, no royal inscriptions. Only the bricks remain perfectly aligned, whispering the memory of countless careful hands. You wander toward one final well, sitting slightly apart near the city's edge. A lone bucket still lies beside it, long decayed, but its shape faintly outlined in the dirt, a quiet, almost poetic reminder of the last person who likely fetched water here. The greatness of Mohenjo-Daro wasn't built on grandiose ambition. It was built on quiet excellence, on doing small things well, on getting the slope right, on maintaining the drains, on valuing clean water for everyone. As you turn back toward the fading streets, you realize you've reached the soft heart of this entire story. Not just pipes and drains, but people. Thousands of forgotten engineers who, without fanfare or fame, built a city where plumbing wasn't an afterthought. It was the very blueprint for daily life. Next, we'll gently step toward the final chapter of Mohenjo-Daro's plumbing miracle. Not how it was built or who built it, but how against all odds, so much of it survived to quietly astonish the modern world. Section 40s. You walk now through the quietest parts of Mohenjo-Daro, where the ruins thin and the world feels like it's holding its breath. There are fewer walls here, fewer outlines of homes, but beneath your feet, the work of those ancient hands still whispers. The bricks, the drains, the wells, they've outlasted the voices, the footsteps, the daily rhythms that once filled these streets. And that's the quiet marvel how much of this plumbing endures. Historians still argue whether it's the dry climate, the protective blankets of silt, or simply the perfection of the original design that preserved so much. But whatever the reason, you're standing amid one of the most intact urban infrastructures of the ancient world. You pause at one final uncovered drain. Its neat rows of bricks form a narrow channel, still sloped, still intact, still ready to carry water if you were to pour it in right now. The simplicity of the design gravity slope, tight-fitting bricks, makes it both elegant and eternal. Without moving parts, without iron or steel, without machines, this quiet little invention simply worked. You step onto one of the city's elevated platforms, again gazing across the spread of low brick outlines and broken walls. It's astonishing to consider how advanced this all was for its time. In 2500 BCE, while other civilizations still emptied chamber pots into city streets, the people here quietly built private latrines, covered drains and sewage systems that would make some later medieval cities look positively primitive. You crouch beside another partially filled well, its mouth still perfectly round its walls, as solid as if they'd been laid yesterday. These wells might easily have been forgotten pits by now, crumbled, filled in. But instead they persist. Some were discovered fully intact by the first archaeologists to uncover this city in the 1920s. Historians still argue how much we've truly uncovered. Only a fraction of Mohenjo-Daro has been excavated. Much of the city remains buried, likely protecting even more intact wells, drains, and homes beneath layers of safe, undisturbed soil. The secrets of the Indus engineers continue to sleep, waiting patiently for careful hands to rediscover them. You gently run your hand across a wall, tracing the smooth, time-worn bricks. The craftsmanship feels deeply human, modest, precise, not designed to impress visitors, but to serve families who would wake, eat, bathe, and sleep within these very walls. The plumbing wasn't separate from daily life, it was part of its quiet heartbeat. As you stand again, a light breeze moves through the ruins. You realize that Mohenjo-Daro's survival isn't just physical, it's intellectual. Its legacy reshapes how we think about ancient people. The myth that early civilizations were dirty, primitive, and oblivious to hygiene crumbles here, brick by brick, drain by drain. You hear the distant call of a modern bird overhead, perhaps one of the same species that once perched here thousands of years ago, watching the same steady flow of water into the same well-maintained drains. Even after collapse, after centuries of abandonment, nature never fully claimed back the city's design. The lines remain visible. The slopes are still there. The knowledge still hums quietly beneath your feet, waiting to be noticed. And perhaps that's the most humbling part of all. The people of Mohenjo-Daro didn't build their plumbing system to last forever. They built it to serve. But in serving so well, it outlasted even their own civilization. You glance one last time at the network surrounding you. These ancient bricks, these stubborn drains, still leading toward unseen outflows. And realize that the true wonder isn't just how it was built. The wonder is that it's still here, still whispering its soft, steady story through every perfectly aligned brick joint. Soon we'll bring our journey to a close, allowing the city to rest once more under its protective sky. But before we part, we'll take one last gentle step to honor the forgotten minds who shaped this place, and to let their legacy ease us gently toward sleep. Section 15. You settle down on a weathered stone, letting the warm breeze carry away the dust of your journey. The sun begins to dip low, casting long shadows across the ancient cityscape. In this quiet moment, you feel the weight of time settle softly around you, like the gentle hush before sleep. Mohenjo-Daro stands not just as a ruined city, but as a testament to human ingenuity and care. Its plumbing systems, hidden modest but brilliant, reflect the hands and minds of countless artisans, engineers, and everyday citizens who quietly shaped their world. Historians still argue about many details about who precisely built these systems, how knowledge was passed down, and why the city ultimately faded. But one thing is clear, they mastered the art of living with water in a way few civilizations before or since have. You imagine the lives behind these drains and wells, the laughter of children playing by the public baths, the daily ritual of fetching water, the skilled hands repairing broken bricks, the silent work of maintaining a city's lifeblood. These are the stories that endure, even if their names are lost. As night deepens, you feel the city's pulse slow its rhythms, fading gently into quiet. The bricks cool beneath the stars. The wells settle into calm stillness. The drains rest empty, awaiting the next rainfall, the next life. Let yourself drift now, carried by the soft echoes of flowing water and the whispered legacy of a city that once thrived through its thoughtful embrace of the simplest, most essential element, water. Breathe deeply. Feel the calm of a civilization that cared deeply for the daily acts that sustain us all. Rest easy knowing that even in forgotten places, human ingenuity flows on. Sleep well, traveler. Mohenjo-Daro's silent waters watch over you tonight.